The first crack echoed across the parade ground like a gunshot, sharp, violent, and impossible to ignore. 282 soldiers stood frozen under the burning sun, their breaths caught somewhere between shock and disbelief. No one moved. No one spoke. Because what they had just witnessed wasn't just defiance, it was a moment that would be whispered about for years. A moment when power shifted, when fear shattered, and when a woman refused to be broken. If you believe in courage, second chances, and standing up for what's right, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Stories like this deserve to travel far. Her name was Elena Carter, a name that, until that morning, barely anyone bothered to remember. She was just another recruit in the eyes of the system, another uniform, another number, another body expected to obey. But behind that quiet presence was a storm shaped by years of struggle. Elena had not come from privilege or comfort. She grew up in a small, fading town where dreams were often buried under responsibility. Her father, once a proud mechanic, had lost his health to years of labor, and her mother worked endless hours just to keep food on the table. Elena learned early that life did not hand out mercy, it demanded strength. Joining the military was never about glory for her. It was survival. It was a chance to rewrite her story, to escape the limitations of her past, and to prove, if only to herself, that she was capable of more. But from the very beginning, the path was brutal. The training grounds were not just physically demanding, they were emotionally relentless. And at the center of it all stood Colonel Victor Hargrove. Hargrove was known as a man who thrived on control. His voice alone could silence a room, his presence could tighten every muscle in a soldier's body. He believed in discipline through fear, in breaking people down until they were nothing but obedience. And when Elena arrived, he saw in her something he disliked immediately, not weakness but resilience. The kind that didn't bend easily. The kind that didn't break the way he wanted it to. He singled her out from the start. Extra drills, harsher punishments, longer hours under the sun. While others collapsed, she endured. While others complained, she stayed silent. Not because she wasn't hurting, but because she had learned long ago that pain was something you carried quietly. But Hargrove mistook her silence for submission, and that was his greatest miscalculation. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between them grew like a storm gathering force. The other soldiers noticed it, whispered about it in hushed tones when the lights went out. They saw how Elena never flinched when the colonel barked orders inches from her face. They saw how her eyes never dropped in fear. And slowly, without realizing it, they began to respect her. But respect, in a place ruled by ego, is dangerous. The morning it all changed began like any other, lines perfectly straight, boots polished, eyes forward. The sun hung high, unforgiving, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch the moment thinner with every passing second. Hargrove walked down the line, inspecting, judging, searching for imperfection. When he stopped in front of Elena, the air itself seemed to tighten. There was something different that day. Perhaps it was the exhaustion finally catching up. Perhaps it was the weight of weeks of silent endurance pressing against her chest. Or perhaps it was simply the moment destiny decided enough was enough. Hargrove's voice cut through the silence, louder, sharper than usual. He accused her of insubordination over something trivial, something so small it barely existed. But it was never about the mistake. It was about control. About proving that no one, especially not someone like her, could stand tall in his presence. And then it happened. His hand rose, not as a command, not as a gesture, but as something far more dangerous. A line was crossed in that instant, a line that should never have been touched. For a fraction of a second, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. Elena didn't step back. She didn't hesitate. Years of buried pain, of silent endurance, of refusing to break, they all converged into a single, decisive moment. Her movement was swift, precise, almost instinctive. The crack that followed wasn't just bone, it was the sound of power collapsing. Hargrove's arm bent in a way it was never meant to, and the man who had ruled through fear fell to his knees, his authority shattered along with his pride. Gasps rippled through the formation. 282 soldiers stood witness to something they had never imagined possible. But what stunned them the most wasn't the act itself. It was Elena. She stood there, breathing heavily, her face not filled with rage, but something far deeper, something raw and human. It wasn't victory. It wasn't triumph. It was the release of everything she had carried for so long. In that moment, she wasn't just defending herself. She was reclaiming her dignity. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Officers rushed in, orders were shouted, and the once perfect formation dissolved into confusion. Elena was taken away, her future uncertain, her actions already being judged before the truth could even settle. But something had changed. The soldiers who had once watched in silence now looked at her differently. Not with fear, but with understanding. Because deep down, they all knew, it wasn't just about that moment. It was about everything that led to it. Days passed, and the story spread beyond the training ground. Investigations were launched, testimonies were taken, and slowly, the truth began to surface. Hargrove's methods, his abuse of power, the culture of fear he had built, it all came to light. And for the first time, the system that had once protected him began to question itself. Elena's future hung in the balance, but something unexpected happened. Voices rose. Soldiers spoke out, not just for her, but for themselves. Stories that had been buried came forward, painting a picture that could no longer be ignored. Elena's act, once seen as defiance, began to be understood as something else entirely, courage. And in the end, while consequences remained, so did change. Elena wasn't just remembered as the soldier who snapped a colonel's arm. She became a symbol of something far greater, the moment when silence broke, when fear lost its grip, and when one person's courage gave others the strength to stand. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. And before we reach the end, we have a special request. Drop a comment with the word courage, if you believe standing up for yourself can change not just your life, but the lives of others too. Because in a world that often demands silence, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be quiet. Elena Carter never set out to become a symbol. She never asked to stand in front of hundreds and redefine what strength looked like. But life has a way of placing ordinary people in extraordinary moments. And when that moment came, she didn't run from it. She faced it. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that true strength isn't about power over others, it's about the courage to stand, even when the world expects you to fall.